Animal ethics is a broad topic that includes animal rights issues in areas such as food, clothing, entertainment, and personal gain. There are many moral issues that are brought up when considering the many ways in which animals can be exploited. It is important to pay attention to these because through change in these areas, there is the power to change the world not only for animals, but for humans as well. In order to gain a better insight into this complex topic, I watched 2 documentaries and a film. I'll provide the links to these under the link to this podcast. Earthlings was a documentary on the treatment of animals that are going to be used for food, clothing, or other domestic purposes. It was shocking how these animals were almost tortured right up until they died. When most people hear the word speciesism, they would laugh and say that's ridiculous, they're just animals. But that's exactly the problem. They're helpless animals. As humans, we are very different than animals, and while some animals are forced to kill other animals to survive, we are not. Our brains are highly developed, and we are capable of surviving in many ways animals with less developed brains are not. Most restaurants mainly serve meat, and it can be challenging to find one that serves vegetarian options. It's easy just to eat whatever's convenient, not think about the fact that you're eating something that was once living, some animal's brother or sister or child. It's easy to forget that you are eating something that once had feelings or emotions, something that cares about its life and does not want to feel pain. Humans haven't always had the option to choose what we eat, and often before we had that choice, many animals had to suffer because we didn't have much of a choice but to eat them. However, now that we do have the option not to eat animals, we can finally start to think about how ethical we are being in our food choices, and what effect our food choices have on our health, the environment, and also on the animals themselves. With the right diet, and in some cases supplements, we can completely cut living things out of our menus. It's not necessary for everyone to immediately change their food choices and eliminate meat entirely. I understand this is a huge change and not easy. Instead, I think that everyone should really think about the things that happened to that chicken in your sandwich before it ended up on your plate. From there, take the next step to cut down on your meat consumption. Eventually, cutting it out entirely over time. It's very hard to make such a big change in your life. Eating meat is something most people have been doing for almost their whole entire life, and for them to suddenly cut that out can be very difficult. However, I think given enough time and thought, most people would make the ethical decision. I, along with most of the population, would hope that these animals would at least be killed quickly and humanely, but often, for animals such as dolphins and whales, who are used for their meat, fat, and skin mostly, they die a slow death, often bleeding out or killed with knives, blunt hooks, or harpoons. For cows and other similar animals, this process is even worse, being forced into the back of trucks, made to go without water or food for days on end, having chili peppers rubbed in their eyes, being pulled by ropes that go through their nose, having their necks twisted and their tailbones broken just to keep them moving. Upon their arrival at the slaughterhouse, more than half of them are already dead. And to make the experience even worse, they are killed right in front of each other. Instead of being killed relatively quickly, they are often dispatched by hacking and sawing with a dull blade. This is hard to hear, isn't it? Are you feeling like you'd rather not even listen? That's the problem. Too many people just don't want to know. Maybe they are afraid that what they learn would be so terrible that they would change their mind. Has this information challenged your morals or created an ethical dilemma for you? It does for me, and that's the reason I choose to not consume or wear animal products. The production of animal products is not just bad for the animals. After leather is acquired from cows, it needs to be tanned. Remember, leather is dead skin. Normally it would rot and decay along with the animal, but to prevent this, the leather is treated with very harmful substances such as chromium. The negative health effects are very apparent when we look at the people tasked with tanning the leather. They face terrible health issues because of this work. Most major clothing chains sell Indian leather, which is acquired from Indian farmers, who raise the cows, often only selling them with the promise that they will live out the rest of their life on a farm to be used for dairy, because killing cows is against the law in most parts of India. This, of course, is not the case. These cows meet the same unfortunate fate as many others. law and morals once again fail by the wayside for profit and pleasure. The documentary Vegucated was about 3 meat-loving New Yorkers who choose to eat vegan for 6 weeks. They initially do this for their health, but they soon realize the darker side of food production and discover that their food choices can change the world. Some of them were having a hard time at first, but they stuck with it because they believed that it was the moral thing to do, and that drove them to keep going. One woman brought up a very good point. We can't blame people for eating meat or call them the bad guys, because that's not fair. Most people just aren't thinking about their food or don't know how the animals were treated. They need to be educated on the subject and make the decision themselves. Finally, the film I chose to watch was Charlotte's Web. In looking for movies to watch on this subject, I realized most animal rights movies were children's movies. I thought this was interesting, and made me wonder why this issue is so important to children, but less important as we get older. I think we lose some sensitivity for the suffering, and it's easier to just turn a blind eye and ignore what's going on, or rationalize it in some way. This film basically tells the story of a spider who saves a pig from the slaughterhouse by showing everyone how remarkable he is. The only human to ever show true sympathy for the pig was a child. I like that this story pointed out another side of the animals that people consider food. I think that every living thing, from humans to animals, are so much more than what others define them as. It is important to remember this. We did not make any of these beings, and I don't think it should be up to any being capable of rational thought and complex behavior to decide who should suffer and who has the right to live.